Hello everybody, this is AW Joshua Hyperion Achaya. Welcome to a good old Theory Thursday. I don't know if we're reading even theory. I don't know. I just kind of want to read something to shit talk. You all know that. Well, not you all. I don't know who listens. If you listen, and if you listen to like to a couple of things, you probably know that. One, I like quantum mechanics. Two, I like the dialectics. But boy, do many people get both of those things wrong. Well, I like physics in general. So we're reading Quantum Physics, Dialectics and Society. From Marx and Engels to, I don't know how to say that in Russian. Krenikov, let's just say Anglo style.
Krenikov, yeah.
And Haven by Ben Gliniecki from December 20th. 2013 from In Defense of Marxism, that, you know, pretty Trotsky rag basically.
Or what?
You know, the pseudo Fourth International, which is never going to materialize. Led by some of our favorite dialecticians like Alan Woods, who says that Big Bang isn't true because it's not dialectical. But I just want to see how wrong they get things. And because even people who I respect who ever mention this, like it's just a bad magnet for misunderstanding. Like I respect Andy Blunden. You know, he's probably one of the better Hegelian Marxists.
Yeah, he's not a Trotskyist though.
No, he's more of an Ilyankovite Leninist sort of. I don't really think he has like much of an affiliation to those kinds of ideologies. But he once mentions this too, and he's like, "Oh, by the way, you know, quantum physics, you know, is like the contradiction, and, you know, that shows you that it's true." And I was like, "What? Like, come on, man! You gotta have more tact than that. You gotta look into these things with a lot more critical of an eye." But anyways, we'll get into this, and I'll try to explain why I disagree with much of what they're gonna say. So, starting, did I link it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Quantum physics occupies a fascinating place at the cutting edge of modern scientific research. First developed in the early 20th century, quantum theory is allowing today's scientists to plumb new depths when it comes to matter and motion. Always this thing of matter and motion. I don't know what the hell their deal is. Like, what's so amazing about that? Ooh, matter and motion. Well, what? A new book, Quantum Social Science, by Andrei Krenikov and Emmanuel Haven, argues that applying the logic of quantum theory to social systems can take our understanding of human society to a whole new level.
I don't know. I think it's the whole, self-moving thing. We don't know exactly how it works. We don't know what moves my brain, makes me move my arm. Does it really matter that much? Probably not. Like, once we discover the reason or the causality, if we can, it won't really change much.
It's just spooked. Let's just say that. It's like super spooked. Even though, like, if you're a materialist and you're like, wow, quantum mechanics is so amazing, you're spooked as fuck.
Yeah. You need to get spooked by spirit.
Yeah.
I mean, I was actually told too that quantum mechanics actually debunks materialism.
Yeah, people who say that are spooked as fuck. Like, I'm serious. Like, you hear it and you hear it and you hear it, and, you know, on TV you see it a lot because it's what sells. You know, they don't put things on TV that nobody watches. If you basically tell people, hey, look, magic is real, which is what a lot of people think quantum mechanics is. They just think it's magic. It's basically a scientific, excusable way to believe in magic, and everybody wants to believe in magic. So, we'll get into that. So, seemingly without realizing it, these scientists are following in the footsteps of Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels, who developed the logic of dialectical materialism out of a philosophical inquiry into the natural world. Oh, no, they didn't.
Again, wrong.
On this basis, by applying scientific logic to society, they developed a theory of scientific socialism. No, they didn't. These people don't even read Marx and Engels. Like, fuck. the theory wasn't empirically derived. It was basically the inverse, and even Marx says so. Look, you don't start with like what's empirically given, which is usually the immediate singular, but you start with, the rationally given, which is the whole. And you should not start with givens in the first place, but it's just the way things work. Let's get into this real quick. It starts hard and fast. The logic of quantum physics. Quantum mechanics is complex and occupying as it does a place at the frontier of human knowledge. Arguments still rage among scientists as to the correct interpretations and explanations of quantum theory. Also, this fetishization of physics, God, I fucking hate it. I hate it. Oh, it's the frontiers of human knowledge. No, it's not. I mean, people are just so unaware of like how much we don't know. Like, any field that you're in, you're at the frontiers of human knowledge the moment you actually get into like the real stuff. We don't know so much about biology, it's not funny. We don't know so much about chemistry, it's not funny. Like, anywhere you go, it's like, you don't have to be doing this quote-unquote fundamental, because most of this stuff is fundamental its own ways. And it's all groundbreaking, it's all, earth-shattering, it's undoes paradigms and blah, blah, blah. And it's just like, you don't hear about it because, it's not mathematics, it's not as exciting. And there's a lot more hand-waving.
I blame this fetishization of physics recently, at least on things such as like the Big Bang Theory television program. Like, they're supposed to be physicists, and everyone likes that show. So
people just think it's like, it's like just like a...
And that I fucking love science. Channel and things like that.
Well, it's also this whole like reductionist, like, physics can explain everything, because everything in biology can be explained through chemistry, and everything in chemistry can be explained through physics.
Yeah.
And again, like, they don't really understand how it works.
Like, as if they understand. Yeah. Mathematicians, everything's math.
And then that's how you get people like Black Science Man.
Unfortunately. I mean, I've already like ranted about Stephen Hawking enough, so we've done some recordings. It gets into it more, but
Neil deGrasse Tyson.
Anyways, it's the fetishization of math. People are like, math is hard. It takes, if you do understand math at all, like, you must be really smart. That it's not really anything as deep as you think. Now, I'm not saying I'm great at math. I'm not. I suck, and let me tell you, I don't care. Because I'm not about to go and like study theorems and actually do real math. Because most people don't understand what real math actually even is. They think that if you like are a human calculator, you're good at math. No, that's not what math even is for mathematicians.
Not even close.
Math is more like logic, and if you ever like look at a logic textbook, you'll see what it really is. But it's nowhere what people think. But anyways, back on this. It all began with the observation that light can be measured as both a particle and a wave. Oh boy, this thing. Well, let's see what they say. I'll explain why I think people misunderstand this. Niels Bohr, famous for a series of thought experiments that sought to explain quantum physics, hypothesized that by trying to measure light or any other particle, we inevitably change its behavior. His argument was that the measuring device itself delivers random kicks to the particles that cause a fundamental change in its behavior. For this reason, he argued, light can appear to be both a particle and a wave, but as soon as you try to measure that light, it inevitably becomes either a particle or a wave, depending on your method of measurement. It cannot be measured as both at the same time. This approach, based on Heisenberg's uncertainty principle, brings out an interesting point in relation to the logic of quantum physics. In order to accurately explain what was happening, Bohr noted that the more accurate the measurement of the location of a particle, the less accurate the measurement of its movement, and vice versa. In other words, there is a contradiction between the particle and its movement between matter and motion. No. And here's why. One, this whole thing is just so misunderstood. One, the whole thing has nothing to do with observation, because most people misunderstand this as... One, the often misunderstood thing is that it has to do with consciousness. It has nothing to do with consciousness. It can be a machine, quote-unquote, observing, and it'll do the same thing. Two, what Niels Bohr says is exactly why it happens. you're hitting, you're trying to hit a golf ball with another golf ball, and guess what? You're hitting it. The moment you try to measure a golf ball with a golf ball, you're gonna smack it, and you're gonna disturb it, and you changes it. At our scales, it doesn't matter because we're not trying to measure things in that manner. So if you want to find out how fast a car is going, you use a laser beam. Ta-da! It doesn't move the car because it's smaller. So if you want to measure something without disturbing it, you use something smaller than it. But when it comes to particles, like small atomic things, we don't have anything that's smaller than small atomic things. So we got to hit them with things their own size and with things at their own scale of energy. So if you're in a vacuum and the only way you're going to see it is by hitting it, well, guess what? That changes its trajectory. You change its path. It's not mind-bending whatsoever. It has no dialectics, no contradiction whatsoever.
You're perturbing.
You're perturbing. That's it. It's just a matter of scale and the fineness, the refinement of what you're measuring with, and you're hitting a basketball with a basketball as hard if not harder than it's going. So of course you're not going to be able to get two things. You're not going to get its direction, and you're not going to get its momentum. You can get one or the other. You get the direction by, hey, look, you shoot it out. It hits something at the end. You're like, oh, it came this way. That was its direction. If you want to find out how fast it was going, somewhere in between, then you hit it in between somewhere, and then you don't know where it went until it gets to the other end. But whoop-de-doo, that's not mind-bending whatsoever. Second, the whole particle wave thing, it's based on, yes, indeed, the ways you read it. A lot of people misunderstand it in that it's not that the particle thing turns into a particle or a wave, it's its motion has wave or particle motion. So you can get like a bunch of points, send them one by one, and you'll get a point at the end. It's just a particle. But if you send a mass of points, either one by one or as a whole, it's going to create a wave pattern on the other side. And what does that tell you? It doesn't tell you anything other than, oh, this has both particle properties and it has wave properties. Nowhere in there is there any tell whatsoever about that, oh, this particle is a wave. That's nonsense. Like, complete and utter nonsense. Has nothing to do with it.
Okay. So is it like if you were firing an arrow at a target and you're trying to hit the same spot, but you move?
But the arrow, but the arrows moves here and there, and you throw a bunch of arrows and you start seeing a pattern, that there is a wave pattern to where the arrow lands. That's what it is. It's not that the arrow, people think that it means that the arrow itself somehow diffuses immaterially into a wave, and it then becomes an arrow at the end, and there's, it became a particle and a wave. No, it's not how it works. It's nothing like that.
Yeah.
If you don't know what I'm talking about, look up David Bohm's deterministic quantum theory. Cuts right to that bullshit. There's nothing utterly mysterious about this. Quantum particle wave duality is complete and utter bullshit. It's nothing but a categorical error. It's caused precisely by the very things I love Hegel for fixing. It's caused by a misunderstanding. You apply the wrong concepts to a certain thing. The reason people misunderstand this is, by and large, because they, with a certain experiment called the Michelson-Morley experiment, it was claimed that they got rid of any notions of an ether, that space was something. It has some material, whatever to it. And when you got rid of that, there was no way to explain the wave motion of particles. So the only way to make it work was, well, if there is no wave that the particle itself riding, the particle must be a wave itself somehow. That's why they say it. But if you get rid of that stupid assumption, guess what? It makes perfect sense. And there is no dialectics to it. Well, there is there's always dialectics to things, but I mean, there's none in this sense that they're talking about. So, yeah. And I don't know what they brought. Yeah, I don't know why they brought up Heisenberg's uncertainty principle. It has nothing to do with it. So this contradiction is at the heart of our understanding of the universe because it is impossible to conceive of matter without it. Well, we can conceive it fine without it, and we still do. Nobody really goes around thinking about matter in this way. Quantum physicists still just treat it as just particle systems. I mean, shit. Go look up anything on the standard particle theory, standard particle model, which I think is wrong, by the way. There's plenty of reasons to think that model is just deeply wrong, but I won't get into that. And just FYI, as I said, I'm not a physicist. And so if you're a physicist and you're like, well, you're full of shit, AW, I'd be like, well, okay, man, that's like, we can talk about that. You know the math, but I can definitely deal with the concepts.
Just don't say you're full of shit and don't explain why. We want to know.
Yep.
We care about
But yeah, I'm not just making this shit up for myself. You know, it's like, oh, I am so great that, you know, I alone saw this. No, I have read physicists themselves who have PhDs and have proven that they know their shit to you know, have criticisms of these things. And I find the criticisms conceptually valid. So anyways. So this contradiction is not at the heart of our understanding of the universe, regards to what he says. All matter is in motion. Oh, sure. Hegel says the same thing, by the way. Matter is space, well, place in motion.
Yeah.
The particles that make up everything are constantly vibrating, moving, and changing. Yep. The planet itself is in constant motion around the sun, and our solar system is in constant motion with the spinning of the Milky Way, which in turn is constantly moving in relation to other galaxies. I don't know why he mentioned this at all. What the hell does this... What relation does this have to do with particle waves?
It's quantum mechanics.
It's quantum mechanics. I ain't gotta explain shit.
Huge quantum mechanics.
You know that meme image of like the elf? It's like, it's magic. I don't gotta explain shit.
Yeah.
What is dialectics? Oh, what indeed. Heraclitus, the ancient Greek philosopher, famously said that everything changes and nothing remains the same, and that you can never step twice into the same stream. It is the ideas of ceaseless change, motion, interconnectedness, and contradiction that define dialectical thought. The philosopher Zeno famously tried to illustrate how essential dialectical thinking is to understanding of the world by using thought experiments. He poses the following. Imagine an arrow in flight. At any one durationless instant in time, like the freezing frame of a film, the arrow is not moving to where it is going to, nor is it moving to where it already is. Thus, at every conceivable instant in time, there is no motion occurring. So how does the arrow move?
Prime move.
So Hegel actually talks about this in the philosophy of nature. He gives a bit of more of expanded explanation of what this means, and that you know, the arrow is always occupying fully its own place at every point in time. So if movement is the change of place, but the arrow is always in its own place at all times, how the hell does it move? And Hegel says, indeed, it is a contradiction. It is indeed a contradiction. It is a dialectical contradiction. So it makes perfect sense. But
its place moves.
Yeah, the place literally does what places do, and they negate themselves. And in negating themselves, they only return to themselves, because it becomes another place, but that other place is nothing but that one place that was already the place. And if it sounds like circles, yes it is. But that's everything in Hegel when you really get to it.
Its place was already in that enemy soldier's head.
Yeah, that's basically it. You know, it didn't really move. In the view of eternity, it never moves. It only moves, you know, in the temporal view, but that's always been its place. So, to answer this, we are forced to embrace what appears on the surface to be a contradictory idea, that the arrow is, at any one time, in more than one place at once. This thought experiment serves to highlight the contradictory nature of the movement of matter in the world. And they really don't do a good job of explaining why this is a contradiction. Indeed, it is in more than one place at once, but it is indeed still exactly in one place. That place is places. Let's just say that. And when place is places, that it is placed, it has moved. That's all it is.
It's the one in the many places.
It's really logical autism. I'm not going to get into it. The German philosopher Hegel further developed the dialectical in a systematic form. Instead of trying to discard contradictions, Hegel saw in them the real impulse for all development. In fact, Hegel saw the interpenetration of opposites as one of the fundamental characters of all phenomena. Hegel's philosophy is one of interconnectedness, where the means and the end, the cause and the effect are constantly changing place. Not really. It explains progress in terms of struggle and contradiction. Not really. Not a straight line or an inevitable triumphal march forward. Yes, really. I don't know which Hegel they read. Hegel's main mistake, though, was to see all of this development as essentially reflecting the movement of a mystical idea or world spirit.
I think they probably mean in the sense of it being like naturally developing, in the sense where it's given, like it's obvious where it's headed or something, you know, straight line or whatever. I don't know. I'm trying to give them the benefit of the doubt.
We all know exactly where
I
it's
think
headed.
they mean in the sense of they read the Wikipedia page for Hegel.
Probably. Yeah.
Let me tell you, we all know where things are headed. One, they're headed towards the alien eschaton, and two, everything's headed to freedom.
Hope so. Yeah. Yep. History's just marched towards freedom. So in that way, it is an inevitable triumphal march forward. It's just like I
just doesn't have to be for us.
2 steps forward, 1 step back. Like we see from our perspective, our own historical perspective. Oh, things are getting worse. Well, not really. Not from Spirit's perspective.
Yeah, not from like, you know, the grand perspective. Because even if we humans fail, trust me, some aliens somewhere, they got communism, so it's all right.
Yeah.
And that's if you learn to read Hegel, that's exactly how things work. Just because it failed here doesn't mean it's not going to succeed over there. Your failure...
It's all happening.
Yeah, it's all happening.
It's all going for...
You know, democracy didn't happen everywhere
said,
at once, but it happened somewhere in the world, and that's how it all works.
William Blake said, nothing is lost. It's all moving forward. Everything's on track. You
know, I hope that's true deep down. I don't know that it's true, but I have high hopes that it's true. Even if it's not again. For us, like so that's cool. What you know. It's just one thing people misunderstand. They think that it means that Hegel's things are for finite things. They're not. You know, we can go to hell in a handbasket. It doesn't matter. That dialectic keeps going. Doesn't have to go on with us. Maybe it's the Martians. You know, maybe the Martians will then go like, "Wow, those humans are pretty stupid." You know, we gotta make communism happen. And there the dialectic goes on, see? Or maybe, you know, the cockroaches one day evolve, and then they look back. And they're like, those humans, eh? And they're like, they were stupid, eh? Communism's great.
Canadian cockroaches?
Yeah. The bastards.
Or it could be the grass, as in the words of Lysenko, the
Scream.
Grass is waiting for communism.
Okay, I love that.
Yeah. That's a good quote, even if it's stupid.
Yeah, like nature is also, you know, waiting for communism. Good old prolet cult. All right, continuing. Forget the stupid arrow. Marx based his dialectical understanding of society on Hegel's teachings, but he went further and combined dialectics with a materialist view of the world, which sees the real objective world as the only existing world. Well, the guy who came up with the whole multiple worlds theory says you're wrong. And I'm starting to think that's...
Talking about David Kellogg Lewis.
I don't know. I hate that guy, and I wish he was wrong, but I'm starting to think he might be right.
Yeah, he wrote Counterfactuals and...
Possible Worlds.
The other one, Convention or whatever.
Well, they're not possible worlds if they're actual. He's still wrong then. So it's because it's not just possible worlds, because at least as far as...
Yeah. On the plurality
Yeah,
of
it's
worlds.
plurality.
He didn't say they
okay,
were possible.
So it's plurality of worlds, all right. I gotta give it to him.
He put on... Yeah, it was called On the Plurality World. His modal realism, as it's called.
Yeah, all possibilities are actual, which makes sense to me. I mean, obviously. It's...
If he didn't come up with it, I'm sorry. He's who I've read. And I know he's the popular guy, because he was rejected here, went to Australia, they embraced his ideas.
I mean, it's mostly useless to think about it, but, when people start coming into your world from other realities, it makes you think.
Yeah.
But anyways...
It's a torrid man.
So, the real objective world as the only existing one. Well, what other world would exist except the objective world, you dummy?
Mm-hmm.
So that's the meaning of objectivity. Haven't you read Hegel? Of course not.
Nope.
Haven't even read Aristotle.
Or Marx. Or Aristotle.
Well, they have read the Wikipedia pages for them, so it looks like.
Marx discovered that the dialectical laws were nothing more than the general underlying laws of nature and human society. The result is an understanding of the contradictions and ceaseless changes of society and the economy. It is this dialectical understanding of society ultimately that gives Marxist thought its revolutionary character. No, it's not. Even Marx...
Hegel had no idea about
even
that.
Even Marx goes and says, he doesn't say these are laws of nature. He says these are laws of human society. Yeah. We made them up. I mean, like, later in life, he really turns on that. He says, like, this whole historical materialism thing was about the progression of the modes was wrong-headed. Because you can have the shift, but what he was studying at the end of his life was Russian society. Why? Because he thought there might actually be a possibility to skip capitalism and go straight to lower communism.
Yeah, but he thought that it would require
external
expropriation of capital.
It would require external,
not capital resources from elsewhere.
It would require external help. But once somebody else has the technology, you don't have to go through that. And you didn't
the Rodniks, he was
you didn't. I'm of the opinion you don't even have to go through that. You just have to have the proper ideas. But then again, there's reasons
and pre-material conditions.
Yeah, you have to have the chance though of like having the proper what's it called? Result from that though is questionable.
Yeah.
Because the hope, because you have to have this social development of the individual as individual, which is something that capitalism gives to a greater degree than other communal societies. Prior to it did.
Yeah, but not to a degree that. Yeah. Prior to it, but not to the degree that was promoted originally.
Yeah, because you have to destroy the old order, the old ways, traditions. That has to happen.
Yeah. Very difficult.
And capitalism is really great at doing that because it doesn't have to force you to do it. You're going to end up wanting to do it, and just life.
It makes you buy your own identity.
Yeah, you're gonna have to do it anyways. I mean, like for example, the Hmong community here in California. A lot of them, it's not that they wanted to leave their old ways. It's they grow up here. It's a different place. New ideas. They still have part of that communal background, but you just can't live that way anymore. So a lot of the stuff that used to be seasonal, and like, oh, you can take a week off to do a carnival or something like that, doesn't happen. Festival doesn't happen. And that really, then the whole idea of it's okay to be gay, it's okay to gay marriage, it's okay to be trans, it's okay to all these things. All of that, it helps destroy those traditional fetters if they're there. If they're not there, well, it's no need for it. But I do think there was a historical necessity for it, but even then it doesn't have, it alone does not have this power. There has to be a certain cultural drive towards this annihilation of tradition, because you can have just tradition reformed through it without allowing for a genuine individuation. Like Japan.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then you get reactionary traditionalists who want to bring it back and say that we've gone too far.
I mean, because...
Well, I think Zizek talks about this, but a lot of times the modernists and the traditionalists are just working together. Or the imperialists, like with India, of course, they were getting rid of the caste system, but the British helped put it back in place through Orientalism.
Yeah.
They liked it.
And I mean, like what I meant about Japan was that Japan is modernized. Yes, obviously they've definitely lost quite a bit of culture on the way. They've managed to retain a lot of it though, but it's in contradiction to capital. Japan isn't doing so hot because part of its own culture is lowering their own productivity, so to say, for quite a few things. A lot of things are still too communally tied, too much nepotism, too much. There is a significant amount of individuality, but that individuality is highly restricted and subsumed under the communal identity. So.
Well, too, like Eastern cultures tend to be much more family oriented too, and they tend to have a whole like honor and shame dynamic thing going on.
Yeah, which is still huge.
So so if you screw up, I mean, your whole family hates you, and your screw ups bring shame onto the entire family.
Yep. So capitalism has not yet managed to destroy those kinds of traditions, which are exactly the ones which I think should be destroyed.
Well, I think those sort of traditions work well with capitalism, actually.
Yeah,
I think
the whole
problem
capitalism with Asian values thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. The problem with Japan is mainly about how its immigration policy. They don't have a large enough workforce.
And they're racist.
So they have to, yeah.
Largely because they're racist. But they'll know what hit them in like 30 years when like half their population is like old. Well, actually it's going to be more than half. And then what are they going to do? Well, they're going to have to bring in a lot of people. Or move to China, I don't know. But anyways, let's continue. Formal logic, oh boy. However, not all scientists are willing to accept that the discoveries of quantum physics are best explained using the logic of dialectics. Bohr himself was one of these scientists who saw the acceptance of contradiction in science or nature as an acceptance of failure as a scientist. I agree. For scientists like Bohr, the rigid doctrines of formal logic and an abhorrence of contradiction are the foundations of their approach to scientific study. And as they should be, by the way. I mean, we all know what happened with Lysenko. Not to hold anything against Lysenko, but there is a formality to dialectics that people fall into, which is stupid. As a result, Bohr interpreted the uncertainty principle not as a confirmation of the contradictory nature of matter, but instead as a proof that we can never know about the objectively real world. The fact that the nature of matter changes as it is measured proves, according to Bohr, that our experience of the world is subjective, and that any attempt at measuring the objective world will be thwarted by the very act of trying to measure it. Well, yeah, that's true. The fact that it took, to get to that level, to come to that understanding, when you can see that understanding literally with animals. There's no way to really do work with animals without interacting with them and messing with them to a certain degree. And like ignoring that fact, I mean, you're just kind of weird. Yeah, it's a really small detail, but plenty of people notice it. It's not so out there. It's not unnoticeable. And indeed, you don't need to accept just a brute contradiction, a nonsense proposition, at all. You can work just fine, and that's how I like it. This is problematic because this leaves Bohr and his supporters defending a very unscientific position. Wow, I wonder if this guy's a scientist. I wonder what his PhD's in. The history of science has been the expansion of the collective knowledge of the world and its processes. This endeavor is rendered impossible if there is no objective world to be discovered. Not really. You can talk about a subjective world. I mean, it's what Kant did, and it works just fine. Admittedly, it's not, it's not intellectually satisfying, but it works if you want it to. The discoveries of one individual would apply only to the world as experienced by that individual and would have no general scientific application. No, that's not the implication at all. That's not what Bohr means, and that's not what is implied. In fact, the only existence that would be left for any person to prove would be the existence of their own thoughts. So, welcome to Descartes. Ironically, by rejecting the dialectical ideas of contradiction and the unity of opposites, Bohr placed himself in the contradictory position of being a scientist arguing against science. And not any more than anybody else. I mean, Heisenberg was a total idealist. I don't know, he's not talking shit about that guy. As well as Bohr's ideas, other attempts have been made to explain quantum phenomena on the basis of formal logic. One hypothesis is the existence of multiple parallel universes, which would then allow the light we see as a wave to exist as a particle in another universe. Unnecessary. It explains what's happening without rejecting the idea of objective reality, but it avoids accepting a contradiction between matter and motion. Not necessary. The problem with this multiverse theory is that there is no evidence for it. The best that physicists have been able to come up with are abstract mathematical proofs that have yet to be supported by any physical evidence. Well, that's pretty much all of physics. Most of it, anyways. This is the result of a formally logical position that will do anything to avoid contradiction in nature. The rejection of the results of real experiments in favor of a theoretical hypothesis that, despite numerous attempts, does not seem to be backed up by hard evidence. Well, I agree about his critique of the multiple worlds interpretation thing. I don't think it's... I think if it's a thing, it's not literally multiple worlds. It's still one world. It's just multiple aspects of a world. I mean, it's like, it's a difference between being able to see, 2D, 3D, X-rays, ultraviolet, all that jazz. It changes what you see, but there's still one continuous world of, connection. And it affects all levels of itself simultaneously. There's the same physics going on all the time. We just have a very, very tiny portion of which we're aware of. I mean, once again, people are unaware of just how little we understand about the world, and there's weird shit, man. There's weird shit. For example, I didn't know this. I mean, I have to look it up more to find out more. Apparently, radio towers, like, radio transmission towers, for transmitting radio shows and shit. Apparently, they have... The way they're built causes them to have this anomalous power generation that nobody seems to explain, and which annoys power companies a lot. And apparently it's very significant that if you let that flow through just freely, through the tower, it would fry your electronics and everything. So nobody, it's quote unquote anomalous. But apparently it happens the whole time. So, do we understand that? Probably quite easy to understand if it wasn't inconvenient for certain people. Just look up like Tesla's Wardenclyffe Tower on that. Yeah, pretty dry, boring stuff so far. And now we get to the good stuff. Quantum dialectics. In opposition to these formally logical theorists, a number of other quantum physicists have been busy proving that it is only through contradiction that the discoveries of quantum physics can be explained. An experiment carried out by physicist Shahryar Afshar suggests that we are able to measure light as a wave and a particle at the same time. Furthermore, the development of quantum computers is based upon matter being held in more than one state at the same time. I gotta look that up, because I'm pretty sure he doesn't mean what he thinks he means. For the development of quantum computers is based upon matter being held in more than one state at the same time. Not really. I've never read such a thing, and I've read some articles. I mean, pop science, and about as deeply as this guy probably has read. And I have never heard of such things. Nobody really banks on superposition for anything in quantum computing. They rely on far more esoteric effects. While classical computers rely on electrical current to create bits that can either be a 1 or off, on or off, 1, 0, quantum computers will be able to create qubits that can store both a 1 and a 0 at the same time, thus giving these computers vastly increased processing power. I'll have to look that up. Finally, a phenomenon known as entanglement, or action at a distance, suggests that particles that have interacted with each other become linked such that changing one invariably affects the other, no matter how far apart they are. The nature of and explanation for this effect are still not fully known. I don't know why he talked about that. I would expect that, proud materialists would run away from that phenomenon far, far away, because it's spooky. One could say it almost is idealistic.
Uh-huh.
It's like magic. I myself don't think it's magic. You only have to take quantum entanglement as magic if you hold that the speed of light is indeed the speed limit of the universe. If you let go of that, and there is absolutely no theoretical reason whatsoever to hold it at all, no problem. You can have superliminal communication easy. Now, how that would work and upon what that travels, it would have to be on a finer structure than anything we experience normally. But it's there, and there's no reason for it not to be there. So there's no reason to think that... there's no problem in thinking that there is. I for one think space is very material. Without accepting that constant change, movement, and contradiction is at the heart of all things, and that these things are interconnected, we cannot explain the workings of quantum computers or the phenomenon of entanglement. I don't know why he keeps bringing these up, because they seem irrelevant to me. I don't know if any of you seem to think the same thing. Like he's like, oh, but change and movement and contradiction, and we couldn't understand quantum mechanics without it. I understand it perfectly well without it. As perfectly well as a layman can. The discoveries of quantum physics can only be explained using the logic of dialectics. Nope. Once again, look up David Bohm. As a matter of fact, it's strange because David Bohm was a Marxist. He didn't exactly hold to... He was a political Marxist, but wasn't a Leninist or anything, but he believed in socialism and whatnot. But he was not a metaphysical Marxist. He had a sort of quasi-dialectical view, but it's not like Hegelian dialectics. It's just... it allows for certain things, but even he wrote books against exactly what this guy is arguing. That to accept contradictions like that is stupid. It's unscientific, indeed. And it's basically throwing up your hands and going, well, it's magic. I ain't got to explain shit. I'm just going to accept it. And what science does, at least with material stuff, is it works in the realm of causation. Therefore, you got to look for causes and effects. And you got to look for links. And somewhere there's got to be a link. Otherwise, your materialism falls apart. And I like my materialism in nature. It's not absolute, but I like it there. And then there's questions of higher dimensionalities of space and whatnot, and those are possible, I think. Nobody understands them, but we can conceive of them in some form. But anyways, quantum logic in society. In their new book, Krennikov and Haven argue that quantum-like models can be applied to areas outside the natural remit of quantum physics. Quantum theory is normally used to explain the movement of particles at the subatomic level, and the authors do not seek to map these theories onto complex social systems in a mechanical way. Instead, they take the logic underpinning quantum physics and apply it to society. One area they particularly highlight is decision-making, a field particularly relevant to modern economics. Many economic theories rely on the assumption that humans are rational and will make rational, self-interested decisions. This is known as the basic law of total probability, a model to calculate the probability of a particular outcome. Yet this basic law is regularly violated by real-life experiences. One experiment shows that people who make decisions in a two-stage gamble are influenced in the second stage by whether or not they are told how they did in the first gamble, even though the outcome of the second doesn't depend on the first. The reason why this so-called law of economics seems to be inadequate when explaining the real world is because it rests on formal logical. No, the reason it's wrong is because it's just fucking stupid. I mean, like, everybody knows that the past affects the present, and that we are very past-oriented and pattern-seeking animals. The fact that economics in general is a really stupid science full of morons is not really something that's condemning formal logic. It's just condemning economics.
Well, economics too, like as a field, is very separated from other fields. So, like, economists will make they'll make all sorts of bold statements about human behavior while having no real education on
Pretty
psychology
much.
or anthropology or anything. Yeah.
It just shows, they're morons. I mean, it's like you can't attack them for being morons and say, see, therefore, 2 + 2 can't be right. It's not how it works.
I mean, I don't even understand why they're trying to make this whole, like, oh, it's either formal logic or dialectics. I mean, like, I just don't get that whole dichotomy.
They want to feel special, It's the only thing really. Like, it's like, oh, we got something nobody else has. We understand how the real world works, and like, we have the real logic. That's dialectics. It's never anything useful. I mean, like, even Hegel, the guy who, quote unquote, invented modern dialectics. He has a whole chapter in the science of logic dedicated to formal logic, and guess what he says? Formal logic is part of cognition, and it has a valid place to be used. It's pretty useful in pretty much most of everything, except for absolute logics. That's it. Once you start getting into processes and like trying to think holistically, that's when you start to get away from formal stuff. But other than that, it works perfectly fine. There's nothing wrong with it. It's given us a lot of our modern stuff. Works just fine. There's nothing wrong with it. So the only problem is when you absolutize it and say it's like, oh, that's impossible. Even then, you're still using certain aspects of it. For example, contradiction for Hegel is no way just a brute contradiction. We've been reading the logic. We can very much tell that there is actually a very rational way in which the contradiction happens. And it makes total sense. So it's not just a contradiction, it still makes even formal logical sense. So there is no contradiction between dialectics and formal logic in that way. Modern economics too frequently ignores the interconnectedness of factors such as superstition, tradition, sentiment, and other things that, in addition to rational thinking, make up decision-making processes. Well, there you go. They're idiots.
Yep.
Krennikov and Haven point out that the wave-particle duality of matter also violates the basic law of total probability. No, not really. They probably take the idealist, the bad kind of idealist view of it, which is the Copenhagen view, which is bullshit. The contradictory nature of matter in motion means that it is impossible for quantum scientists to pin down the exact location of a particle at one moment in time. That sentence has like no connection between that prior sentence and that sentence. Just because they said, oh, this violates, this one thing that they talk about, all of a sudden you go like, oh, the dialectics of matter, is the quantum wave particle duality. Not not even the same thing. Like, it's not even the same structure of a concept. It's just stupid. Applying the law of total probability does not accurately describe the location of particles. Well, neither does the law of matter or motion. All that physicists can do is give an estimate of the probability that a particle will be in any one place at a given time. In order to explain these probability values in wave-particle experiments, a mathematical factor known as the interference term is introduced. Otherwise known as making shit up and saying, well, we'll just call it n. And call it a thing. And, that's a little thing that was the remainder, but hey, now it's accounted for. Nah. You'd be surprised at how often this is done, where there's a little bit extra left, and they're like, you know what, we'll just call that n, and we'll call it some new bullshit. You can call it a force particle. Sometimes you could call it both a force and particle. Gluons, bosons, and whatnot are just a mess. Now those are actually based on both conceptual errors and formal logical errors. But this guy doesn't know anything, so he wouldn't know how to shit on the right thing. And if you want to know what I'm talking about, let me get the name. Yeah, if you want to know what I'm talking about, look up, I think it's Alexander Unziker, Unzickerer, on the particle model, the standard particle model.
Yep.
He's a physicist who hates it. Hates it with the kind of hatred that, it's righteous indignation.
So we like.
Yeah, that's exactly it. You listen to him and he's like, I don't know how people can be this stupid. He's like, why are we wasting times on this stupid shit? We're making shit up, people. 53 fudge factory. Literally make shit up.
Worst idealism.
Yeah, it's the worst kind of idealism. Yeah. It's real formalism. And this guy's not attacking it. I mean, get with the times. Get with the times. All right. What Krennikov and Haven show is that this interference term, when applied to economics, also explains the seemingly illogical probability values for economic decision-making. What they show is that the same mathematical tools that are required to explain the contradictory process taking place at a subatomic level are also required to explain the contradictory process in society. In other words, the dialectical understanding of quantum particles also applies to economics. That's complete nonsense. I mean, that's just stupid. Now that is formalism right there. You guys can't see me, but I was literally like doing like raising my hand and pointing at the fucking screen. I don't know why. You ever just that kind of reaction? But this is total. This is actual formalism, and he's going with it. He's like, oh, this is dialectical. No, that's the opposite. This is formalism. This is taking a structure from another form, which is simply a formal structure, and going, oh, hey, this looks like that. And just slapping it on there and says, like, oh, look, it's explanatory. No, it's not. It's basically saying, oh, look, we got to put in a little probability fudge factor for like what people do. That doesn't explain anything. That's not actually scientific whatsoever. It's descriptive, yeah, but who the fuck cares? I mean, that's just saying, look, Josh Howe, like 70% out of, 100 times, 70 out of 100 times will, bring up some like meme about, well, why didn't you remote view that, AW? Whenever we're talking about something like that in our random talks, that's not explanatory of anything. You'd have to actually understand why. You'd have to understand, what kind of stupid shit we talk about on Mumble and whatnot. and how often we bring it up, then you'd actually have some sense. It starts making sense when you start actually determining it. It's like, oh, so and so has this probability of choosing this or that because, one, they're a Christian, two, they're a Jew, they're Anglo, they're black, they're this or that, they're a kid, they like Chinese cartoons, they don't. Stuff like that starts explaining, this quote-unquote randomness, but it's not real randomness. I mean, do you get what I'm saying? Like, it's not a real fudge factor. Like, when it comes to the economic stuff, there is no actual fudge factor. You can actually determine pretty well if you have all the factors in play. The thing about quantum mechanics is they need a fudge factor because they don't have anything to account for. They don't know what to account for. It always has to be a probability precisely because they don't know what the actual mechanisms and what the actual determinacies are. There is no determination other than a determination of randomness. So, no, the system which we live at, the level of we live in, the social system, has no such probability of that kind. And if it does, I mean, it's so minute, it's near pointless. So the analogy just doesn't even work. In short, these scientists argue that we should understand quantum physics in a dialectical way. No, they're not. Not even close. They didn't say that, and you're not saying that. Although they don't use the term dialectics. And that using dialectical logic to understand the world can open up the possibility of creating new advances, not only in the fields of science and technology, but also in almost every aspect of society. What this article has proven to me so far is the exact opposite. Thank God scientists don't go that way. I'm sorry, I mean, thank G-D.
Thank you.
Say anyway, are we like in agreement? Like whoever this is, like it's a typical tripe of like they don't understand what it even is, and like it's funny that that they speak about this in such of a seemingly high authoritative way of like look at these scientists, like they're a bunch of morons. They're not using dialectics, and then he talks about what he's talking about and saying why we should do it, and he comes off as an idiot.
Well, it's like, again, it's party propaganda. I mean, that's all it is at the end of the day. I mean, he doesn't know what he's talking about. He's not a scientist. He's not a physicist. Like, he hasn't studied these things in depth. I mean, he's just writing what the party wants to hear or wants to read.
Mm-hmm. It sounds like definitely like the sort of shit you'd hear in your typical Trotskyist party.
I mean, it's just like a nonsense, like trying to save face of like, we're still relevant, guys. I swear. You need us. You need us. You need our dialectics.
I mean, it just seems very comical to me that like they would try to prove dialectical materialism through quantum physics. Like, it just seems so cartoonish.
I mean, I hate the word, but it's fitting. It's pathetic. Let's see what they say about Marx and Engels on dialectics. Krennikov and Haben state that the idea of applying quantum mechanics to social science is still quite new, and it's going to stay quite new quite quickly, and it'll be quite old. It's true that the practice has never been formulated in these terms before, but the idea of deriving dialectical principles from an observation of nature and applying them to society was first developed by Marx and Engels over 160 years ago. Engels sums up his own position in the book Dialectics of Nature by saying, "It is, therefore, from the history of nature and human society that the laws of dialectics are abstracted, for they are nothing but the most general laws of these two aspects of historical development, as well as of thought itself." Yeah, sure thing, Engels. Marx never oversaw that book, by the way, so that's Engels going off on his own. In other words, Engels is saying that dialectical logic can be used to explain both nature and human society. Exactly the same claim as is being made by Krennikov and Haven. Putting words in their mouths? Not at all. Not only that, if you take the dialectics of nature seriously, cleanse yourself by reading some real dialectics of nature, but with Hegel's philosophy of nature. But don't go too fast, it's like drinking vodka, don't drink it too much too fast, you'll puke. In other words, in the book Dialectics of Nature, Engels examines the most advanced scientific information available at the time of writing in the fields of physics, biology, chemistry, geology, mathematics, and astronomy, and explains the discoveries using dialectics. On this basis, he is able to make a number of suggestions for future avenues of scientific study, and even attempts some predictions of what scientists will find. The most famous of these predictions is contained in his essay, The Part Played by Labor in the Transition from Ape to Man, which argues, contrary to the prevailing thinking at the time, that the development of the human brain was a consequence of the development of the hand in the use of tools and not the other way around. I don't know, that made good sense until, in the last, 30 years, we've come to know that plenty of other animals use tools, and they ain't getting smarter, they're smart, but it doesn't seem to be developing anywhere. So it's not simply about having hands and tools. You got to have a little Kantian element there. You got to have a little bit of the a priori capacity to even have such capacities. So I don't know if you're aware, if you ever listened to anything by Chomsky on his theory of language.
I'm vaguely familiar.
In which
with
Chomsky is a bit of a Kantian, in which he says, look, it's total stupidity to say that language developed from, this fucking bunch of monkeys going to, meaning I found berries, and that, eventually, this kind of, cascades into, a generalization of language. And he's like, that's impossible. It's just, it doesn't make any sense. We don't know anywhere of how that has ever happened, nor of how it could happen. So
I only read syntactic structure. I don't think it's in that,
so for language to come about, you have to have the capacities for language.
Mm-hmm.
And that's that. There is no upward development. Just slowly you start getting a little bit of language and then more language. One day, someone in a species is born and bam, they have it. They have the full capacity that others do not. And they're the only ones who are going to get to use it. They can't teach the others. It's like, trying to teach your dog to talk, to understand how to read. It just can't. And there's nothing you can do that will make it so. You can teach your dog tricks and all these things. It just won't be able to. It's not really developed in that way. So, we don't really understand, we don't really understand at all how it is that the human brain developed so quickly in a very, very small couple 100,000 years. The idea that, it was because, we started learning tools and we just kept building on that. It's a nice idea, but it's not really cashed out by anything we know. But, I don't fault Engels for thinking that. It was a really, really good hypothesis for his time. Which argues, contrary to the prevailing thinking at the time, that development of the human brain was the consequence of development of the hand and the use of tools and not the other way around. So the question is still open. Though Hyperion and I have certain ideas, and they don't involve hands.
19.5.
Yeah, it involves 19.5. This view of the development of humans is a dialectical one that views evolution and change as the product of a complex interaction between different parts of the body, and of the interaction between humans and the environment. This was not a mainstream idea at the time it was put forward by Engels because it did not conform to a clear mechanical formula for evolution. However, as modern anthropologists gather more and more evidence of prehistoric humans, they are finding that their discoveries cannot be explained by a basic model that sees the brain develop first, and as a result of the humans produce tools and develop society. In fact, the process of development seems to have been much more complex than that and requires an explanation based on change, contradiction, and interconnectedness, just as Engels predicted. No, yeah, it's... Yeah, good. At least they got this much right in this entire article. But still, what I said stands. We don't actually have any empirical evidence whatsoever of the brain being developed by such activities. Engels' ability to make such a prediction shows the same thing that Krennikov and Haben are suggesting, that understanding the world as being always in the process of contradictory change gives us a more accurate scientific picture of things than to view the world as static mechanical. In his textbook of Marxism, as Lenin described it, Anti-Düring, Engels even provides a dialectical explanation for the apparent conundrum represented by the qubits of quantum computers that are able to store both a 1 and 0 at the same time. He says, "In mathematics, it is necessary to start from definite, finite terms, or they cannot be used for calculation. The abstract requirements of a mathematician are, however, very far from being a compulsory law for the world of reality." Actually, in mathematics, well, probably not. He probably meant it in the proper way. You know, if he's talking about numbers, that's not true at all. If you ever looked at some mathematics stuff, it's pure symbols and no numbers involved, just relations and operations. But indeed, the world is not fully mathematical, but holy shit, the world is pretty mathematical, let me tell you. Just look into stuff like sacred geometry.
Beautiful.
It's not just beautiful, it's scientific.
Ah.
Now there's some by the way, those are dialectical in the proper sense. Like the triangle.
Tell me more.
Oh
Really?
yeah, they're dialectical in the proper sense precisely because they are actually they are absolute forms. It's basically a resonance form resonating off itself in matter. Just like it's also a geometrical relation of itself, just going through itself. So I think those arise though mainly at the material level of resonance rather than a purely spatial mathematical form. That's where you really get the dialectical form in which you can see that these things are truly self-developed from their own systematic self-relation. Like just look up any videos on cymatics, for example, cymatic images, and you'll see it. The way these figures form is precisely through a material self-resonance, which it will just naturally create these forms. It's pretty amazing. So in other words, although the concept of storing the figures 1 and 0 at the same time seems illogical because they are two different definite finite terms, when we consider that these figures are nothing more than abstractions or processes occurring in the real world, the apparent problem disappears. Actually, let me look at what this qubit stuff is. Let's see. In quantum computing, a qubit, or a quantum bit, is a unit of quantum information, the quantum analog of the classical binary bit. A qubit is a two-state quantum mechanical system, such as the polarization of a single photon. Here, the two states are vertical polarization and horizontal polarization. In a classical system, a bit would have to be in one state or the other. However, quantum mechanics allows the qubit to be in a superposition of both states at the same time, a property that is fundamental to quantum computing. But how does it work? let's see, a qubit has a few similarities to a classical bit, but is overall very different. There are two possible outcomes for the measurement of a qubit, usually 0 and 1, like a bit. The difference is that whereas the state of a bit is either 0 or 1, the state of a qubit can also be a superposition of both. It is possible to fully encode one bit in one qubit. However, a qubit can hold even more information, e.g. up to 2 bits using superdense coding. For a system of n components, a complete description of qubits state in classical physics requires only n bits, whereas classical Okay, they keep saying that, but they don't explain what it means, because trust me, whenever they speak of things like this, it sounds like magic, but once they explain what it actually physically means, it ends up being like, pretty commonsensical stuff. Well, I'll look that up later. I'm interested because no one has ever seen superposition, by the way. It's just a theoretical posit. And if they intend to do it that way, and if they have done it that way, it's not the contradiction they're talking about. They're either reading two things from the same thing, or that means using like two different property states of the same thing, which are not contradictory whatsoever. Or they're doing something else, because I refuse to believe it's magic, because that's unscientific. And that's coming from a guy who believes in magic. In the Hermetic sense. If you don't know what that is, find out. So, alright, the numbers themselves are not the concrete reality. It is the real processes that they represent which concerns us. Thus, if we develop a new process that cannot be expressed using the classical system of binary digits, we do not reject that discovery because it doesn't conform to the mathematical abstractions used to define the old process. We simply have to accept that the new process can only be described by introducing the concept of contradiction into our abstract understanding. In short, to take our understanding of science and our capacity for technological development further, we must apply the logic of dialectics. Not really. I mean, I get the spirit of what he's saying. It's a proper scientific spirit, but obviously his understanding of it is way off. Engels thoroughly develops his understanding of dialectics as applicable to nature and society in the short pamphlet Socialism, Utopian and Scientific, where he says, "When we consider and reflect upon nature at large, or the history of mankind, or our own intellectual activity, at first we see the picture of an endless entanglement of relations and reactions, permutations and combinations, in which nothing remains what, where, and as it was, but everything moves, changes, comes into being, and passes away. We see, therefore, at first the picture as a whole, with its individual parts still more or less kept in the background. We observe the movements, transitions, connections, rather than the things that move, combined, and are connected." This passage was written in 1878, long before the concept of quantum theory had been conceived. I don't see anything quantum about that. And yet, this description of dialectics could very easily apply to the central argument by Krennikov and Haven in Quantum Social Society. Questions of entanglement, contradiction, and change are the defining characteristic both of quantum mechanics and economics, history, and human consciousness. In a very, very, very broad and abstract sense, sure. But that's like saying, we're all made of atoms, man. And I'd be like, okay. Doesn't tell me anything useful. The dialectical method, so clearly explained by Engels, permeates all the writings of Karl Marx. I don't think it's so clearly explained, and I don't think it permeates them at all. I read my Marx, I'll have you know, and if you say, no you didn't, well just check out the rest of the videos of my channel. In his economic writings, Marx is able to explain the workings of the capitalist system by highlighting its contradictions and the interconnectedness of all its parts, and nothing to do with quantum mechanics, by the way. The best example of this is the Marxist theory of economic crisis or overproduction. Marx explained that workers are paid less than the value of the goods that they produce, which means that at some point more commodities will be being produced than can be absorbed by the market, leading to an economic crisis. Still not quantum mechanics. This theory highlights the contradiction in capitalism between wages and prices, and it explains how this contradictory state can continue for a long period before a crisis occurs. Hello, Mao. Didn't expect to see you here. Saying that because prices and wages are not a contradiction, except in just like, oh, look, it's like they clash, which is exactly what Mao thinks contradiction is, not what Marx thinks contradiction is, or Engels. It also demonstrates the interconnectedness of all sectors of the economy such that when one country or industry is affected, the rest begin to experience the same effects. Yep, even formal logical economists can see that now. Just as Engels' application of dialectics to evolutionary theory led him to make predictions that are being proved correct today, Marx's applications of dialectics to economic theory is being vindicated by the current economic crisis, a crisis that can only be explained with the Marxist theory of overproduction. And yeah, not really. I mean, it's not always overproduction. Sometimes it's underconsumption. But that's just another way of saying overproduction. And another way of saying just a bunch of other things. So, there's no privileged point in the system that's like, this is always the real contradiction. Not really. Marx, like Krennikov and Haven, applied dialectics to every aspect of human society. Not really. He kind of tried, and when he tried, it was just sort of funny. Like I've read some stuff about his Dialectics of Mathematics, for example. I've seen stuff for and against, and since I don't know shit about actual mathematics, I can't say yes or no. Most of the people who see it, they're like, it's not too bad, but he was an amateur, and some pretty irrelevant conclusions. Because I read like Andy Blunden talk about these two, and like what he got out of that was, to me, really pointless. Basically just something about like, oh look, the dialectics of mathematics is that we started counting with stuff, guys. We had one coconut and then two, and then we took away one, and that's how we got subtraction. I'm like, well, gee, couldn't have figured that out without dialectics. Never crossed my mind. I mean, it's a bit more contrived than that, but it's basically all I remember from that paper of Blunden's. It's nothing amazing, I think. It's also, people have tried to apply that to like trying to get like a dialectics of music. I mean, heck, one of Hegel's students, while he was still alive, wrote a dialectical theory of music, and Hegel was like, yeah, that's sure, whatever, man. Shoved it aside and said, like, that's nice. We all know.
How would you do something how would you write a dialectics of music?
I don't know. I gotta look that up. It's in that dialectics, the philosophy of nature thing in the beginning introduction essay by the translator. He mentions it, and I keep forgetting to look it up. It's probably only in German. Like nobody's ever translated it. And he's like, nobody's even read that shit. Nobody's read it in German, let alone translate it to English. But I think it has something to do with like trying to derive the harmonic scales dialectically, and then like these styles of music and other things, and just seem to.
I've done that.
Didn't
I show you mine on the dialectics of tonality and atonality?
You told me about it.
And deducting, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's possible. At least for the modes of music, and not the styles.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not possible about like genre.
But sure, you can get the tones.
I mean, maybe like historically.
And you'd have to include like sacred geometry into that, because it has to do with resonances.
Yeah. Yeah, should expand.
It was from this rigorous application of dialectical logic that Marx understood the relationship between different classes in society, their contradictions and interconnectedness. Based on this dialectical study of history and economics, summed up in the Manifesto of the Communist Party, Marx and Engels developed the perspective of revolutionary socialism. Not really. Marx wrote that long before he had actually understood dialectics. And if you want to know, there's a book, by the way, on it's very long, and I don't fully agree with it with the authors, but there's some really good portions of it where he really gets into the history of what's the history of Marx and Hegel, Marx's connection to Hegel, and I mean, this is a Marxist, Marxologist, and he openly goes, he's like, yeah, he didn't really read the guy until like 1856. It ain't no mystery, people.
Because he wrote his father a letter saying he hadn't.
Oh, there was like a lot of things to it.
Yeah. But my point was there's definitive material proof.
Yeah. But anyways, also the Communist Manifesto sucks. I mean, I know there's like some catchy lines in there, you know, they're pretty good, but I have never read it. I don't want to ever read it. And sure, you can read it, but just don't go banding it around. It's old. To introduce people to you know socialism through that is, I think, kind of off-putting.
Yeah, not a good idea. It's just a polemic, basically. Has some catchy lines there.
The future of quantum social science. Well, let me tell you the future right now. It ain't going nowhere. It's gonna, you know, contradict itself like, you know, a positive and negative charge and like pop right out of reality. Diffuse back into the dark voids of the mind from which it came. It's an illusion, man. It's an illusion. It is clear that Krennikov and Haven are not Marxists, and it's clear that you're not a Marxist either, Mr. Writer. Nor even are they necessarily conscious dialecticians, nor are you. Nevertheless, consciously or not, they are using modern scientific ideas and concepts that inevitably lead to the same conclusions that Marx and Engels reached many years ago. So, quantum mechanics, therefore communism. Perfect. Makes sense, right? You know, I get it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think I'll start writing, you know, I'll make like a little stencil and like spray paint that. E equals MC squared equals communism.
Well, hey, I mean, it's Jewish physics, right? Jewish physics, Jewish social science, communism.
Equality equals Marxist communism squared.
That's nice.
Oh, I was just saying
E
equals
yeah,
MC squared.
I get it. In applying their particular understanding of the complex interconnectedness at the heart of quantum physics to society as a whole, they are, albeit unconsciously, following the tradition of Marx, Engels, Lenin, and Trotsky. Now, you know, I have nothing against, you know, like the big three, but ain't nobody should be following Trotsky, let me tell you.
I was about to say, it sounds like you just threw Trotsky in there.
Yeah, the guy has nothing. He has nothing. He's contributed nothing. I mean, why can't they just accept he's like a worthless... He's not even a footnote. I mean, like besides, like, oh, he led the Red Army and, like, he lost the power struggle to Stalin, of all people. Not because Stalin was that much better, but because this guy was just so full of himself and was, like, so hubristic that he thought he was too good for actual politics. And when he lost the political game, he's like, "Oh no, I'm the victim in society. You know, they usurped me. Stalin bad." I mean, just read this. Just read the history of the guy. I have nothing but contempt for Trotsky. Like, seriously.
Yeah. He was a sued snake.
He was a sued and he was a snake. I mean, I don't hate the guy, but I don't like him.
Yeah.
However, Krennikov and Haven do not draw the same revolutionary conclusions as Marx and Engels. They are only interested in individual social phenomena such as voting or decision-making, but they stop short of applying their logic to class society as a whole, its history and future development. As such, they are defying their own principles, interconnectedness of phenomena. They didn't see that in their principles whatsoever. They just said, hey, look, there's a fudge factor of probability. Nowhere did they talk about interconnectedness. Talk about putting words in people's mouths. This is not to say that such conclusions could not be drawn by scientists in the future, because, as the authors point out, there are a lot of research grants available in the field of quantum social science. Yeah, there's a lot of research grants for bullshit. Although we can bet that these grants from governments and prestigious institutions will quickly dry up as scientists start drawing revolutionary conclusions. Let me tell you, there's nothing more revolutionary at this point in time than quantum gravity. I mean, no, not really. That's nonsense. We all know here that there is a gravity A and a gravity B. Right, Hyperion?
Yeah, sure.
No, the real revolutionary physics is going on in electrogravitics, let me tell you.
Oh. Are you serious?
Of course I'm serious. That's once that's figured out, that'll be amazing.
Yeah, but I don't. Well, oh yeah. Yeah, I guess so.
It's gonna solve a lot of things at once.
Talking about mercury and what's it called? Bismuth, I believe.
That's magnets, bismuth and zinc.
Yeah, bismuth. And mercury.
No, in the metal it's only zinc.
Oh, well, in the metalloids, yeah. But mercury too has oxidation.
Yeah, believe it or not, apparently there's more uses for bismuth other than Pepto-Bismuth.
Yeah, Pepto-Bismol. Yep. It's strange that, that's pretty much all we use it for mainstream society.
I didn't even know that stupid stuff was metal. What the hell?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and just like, look at bismuth on Google. Like, it's a really dialectical metal. Just look at its shapes. It's pretty radical. It's radical in all the senses. Even the political kind.
Yeah.
But alright, let's continue. However, for Marxist conclusions to be drawn from quantum social science, what is most clearly needed are scientists who recognize the revolutionary potential of dialectical thinking. That's not really. The continued study of quantum physics and the development of quantum computers and methods of encryption are likely to hail progress in the development of dialectical thinking, and as a result develop the school of thought that seeks to apply these ideas to society in general. Yeah, I don't think so at all. We should also note, however, that further study of quantum physics will not automatically equal clear dialectical thinking. For example, Bohr's idea that there is no reality beyond what we observe ourselves is a popular interpretation of quantum phenomena, and is much more mainstream in academic circles than that put forward by Krennikov and Haven. Bohr's interpretation of quantum physics based on formal logic is not just scientifically problematic, but it also has pernicious philosophical underpinnings. Well, Bohr was a total like mystic. He was all into like Hindu stuff.
Yeah.
It is the same philosophy that props up the myth of the self-made man in capitalist society. The idea that a person's experience of the world is whatever he makes of it is entirely subjective. This idea holds that there are no objective factors really holding the individual back, and that success or failure is determined by subjective factors such as how hard a person works or how lazy he or she is, and that's just like talking about completely different phenomena and concepts. Such as denial of objective reality is echoed in Margaret Thatcher's claim that there is no such thing as society, only families and individuals. So you heard it here first, folks. Neil Bohr led to Margaret Thatcher. It's literally quantum fascism. God, we gotta put it out there, Chaya.
Quantum neoliberalism.
Yeah.
There's been a conspiracy in our scientific community all along, and like all these people who watch pop science have been drinking the Kool-Aid of quantum fascism.
Oh shit.
It's like we're all, the more we read like all this weird shit, we just find all these other conspiracies, like the conspiracy of like cultural delusionism. It's now quantum fascism. God, it just pervades our reality. It's like it's physics, literally. These ideas are false and dangerous and must be challenged at every turn, including in theoretical physics. Should be challenged with a bat or a guillotine. All genuine Marxists take an interest in scientific development. I would say so, definitely, but the way I'm seeing it, whoever wrote this is not a genuine one. And neither are all the people on Lefty Pool and all those places. The ability of scientists to come up with new ideas, new technology, new discoveries that are capable of taking society forward is a reflection of the ability of that society to invest in its future. It is also a reflection of the prevailing philosophical outlook of society, and so explanations of scientific ideas can find an echo in explanations for the rest of society. I agree. We have written elsewhere that the decline of innovation in the recent period, a reflection of the decline and crisis of the capitalist system as a whole, and the poverty of the prevailing philosophical thought in modern times. I'd agree. General innovation has gone down, but there's a lot of innovation going on. It's just, when it's some really good innovation, some people just get mysteriously die or, get bought out. Or, the government goes like, oh, that's a nice thing. Let me see. And they smash it and then take the pieces away to God knows where. And that does happen. For this reason, the work of Krennikov and Haben is interesting and encouraging because it confirms once again the validity of dialectical materialist philosophy. No, it doesn't. The philosophy of Marxism. No, that's not the philosophy of Marx. It seems that these scientists are confirming that the way to make the best use of modern discoveries is to revolutionize the way we think about them. Wow, what an idealist thing to say. Now, that's amazing to come from a materialist. You would think that he'd be saying, if he was a real Marxist, with its little trademark symbol, that, the real way to change this is to change the material conditions. Not the ideas. I mean, like, I can just, like, hear, like, Swedenista, just screaming in, like, intellectual agony and rage at this guy.
Yeah.
If we think about these things in terms of dialectics, we can not only understand the science, but economics, history, and society as well. Krennikov and Haben's work provides proof of the scientific basis of Marxist thought, of the radical and revolutionary potential of Marxist ideas, and of the relevance of Marxism today. Well, all this article proved was the irrelevance of pretty much everything he said. I will, however, take the idea of quantum fascism and spread it around. That's people need to be aware of that. But anyways, my final judgment is this: is like typical ignorant stuff, doesn't understand dialectics, doesn't understand the science. Draws some really weird formal parallels, which, right after they rail on against formal logic. And we didn't learn anything. But if you get into things like that and you want to make like connections like that, learn your stuff. Just people who don't know anything, they won't realize that you don't know what you're talking about. But people who do. And it doesn't matter that the people who do realize that you're not talking anything intelligible or smart or useful. But you waste people's times, really. But then again, I don't know. If you fall for this kind of stuff, what can be done? What can be done other than to put you in a gulag for re-education?
Josh and I were talking about re-education camps earlier. How we don't like the idea of it. But,
speaking of re-education camps and
also
Josh,
don't think it would work. What?
Josh, you're
going
good.
until he's a good
you gotta go
Posadist.
until you're a good like quantum communist.
Until he's a Posada Stolenist.
It'll be like, I don't know, it'll be like one of those like little math camps or like science camps or something.
Oh God. Like some nerdy summer camp.
Well, yeah, it's like, it's just gulag is just a camp.
That's a desublimation of gulags.
But he's gonna work hard. We're gonna, it's not gonna be just like fun.
Yep.
You're gonna be working hard. You're gonna be like dialectics. Dialectics while you do push-ups.
Hard at what? Watching Hogan?
Yeah, dialectics while watching all these lectures, doing push-ups, and making like some rope or something to like build a fort or whatnot. And
he's like hooked up to a machine, and it's like, how many planets are in our solar system? And he's like 9, and it shocks him. He's like 40.
No, it'll be like, does existence exist? And Josh will be like, the determinateness, quality, and I'll shock him. It's like, not fast enough, derive faster. Anyways, okay. This was our autism for today, people. Maybe you find it funny. Maybe you just waste away your time. Whichever way you do it, I don't care. See you later. Bye-bye.
Bye.